If I were addressing a congressional panel about how to spend the stimulus money, I would say that money spent on artists going into schools is fairly efficient. You're hiring a person. You're not having to build a huge infrastructure. You're hiring people who have a passion for something. Like, often you'd be putting on clown makeup at 7:15 a.m. and go out and do an 8:30, a 9:30, and 11 o'clock show and be home by noon, taking the makeup off. The CETA arts job made me a working artist and meant that I got each day with an arts agenda. And I could, for that period of my life at least, I could put the day jobs aside. And it also gave me, I've thought a lot about this over the many years since, it gave me a sense of the artist's place in the community. If you go into a school and you've got stuff to teach kids, and the teachers tend to be really happy to see you. Yeah, oh, please come in. Come in, they're really wild today, come in. And, you'd either, like in any performer's gig, you either did well or you bombed. And on a day when you did well and you really felt you taught these kids something, not to be corny about it, but it did raise questions, at least, of the artist's usefulness in society and in culture. Sometimes when I'm doing master classes now in universities, I'll talk about, when you go into a class full of kindergartners and the teacher leaves, you learn real quick what holds them and what doesn't. So I learned, for instance, clothing gags, not being able to get your clothes on. That would make them, lean in. Certain kinds of talking about history tended to lose them. Body gags, laughing and crying, that would sort of arrest their interest. So, yeah, I learned a lot of craft trying to communicate with kindergartners.
Haven't you been the coordinator for the performing artists cell? Which is
right. Actually, that's true. By default, I'm become the de facto coordinator. And
a lot of
spent 6 or 8 hours
seeds of anything I've done since, we're really back in that time in the 70s when I was working with the Pickle Family Circus. I was going into school classrooms. I'd show up at a playground, and it would be my job to take all these kids who were like, writhing, running, hitting each other, throwing things at each other, to kind of bring them in and say, hey, what would you guys think of doing a clown act together? We showed kids really wild slapstick knockabout clowning, and then they'd ask, how'd you do that thing where you put your head in the hat and you come up on your feet? How'd you do? Did you really hit your friend? Did you really hit that other guy when you?
Come back.
The thing about artists is they tend to be shovel-ready. They tend to have done things in their lives to get themselves to a point where they're ready and dying to do what has driven them, get paint on a brush. Some artists are very good natural teachers, some aren't. Some artists have a real sense of working with kids, and some don't. Sometimes a great arts program is just have kids in a room and watch somebody work and just be there while somebody's working. Like in the old days when you got a job in a garage and you just did what the other guys did. Some artists are much more equipped and much more excited about individual instruction and including kids in programs. Both can be great. The whole thing in the 1970s, the CETA, the Comprehensive Employment Training Act, was designed to get money into the economy. So it hired people, started giving them very modest paychecks, but regular paychecks that they could count on for a certain length of time. And so within weeks of hearing about the job, and auditioning for the art commissioners and going through my very cursory half day of orientation training, I was out there. Well, this is a wild time. It's the best of times. It's the worst of times. It's the most exciting time historically. It's also the scariest time with the financial downturn, as they call it. And of course, for somebody born in the middle of the previous century, born in 1950, and I grew up on the privileged end of segregation, or apartheid, if you want to use that word, and this time and now is unimaginable. It's exciting. All that said, because a lot of people are saying that, and they're saying it much better than I, but all that said, here's my greatest hope for the new administration, that the man in the White House is a good manager. He has a managerial challenge of historic proportions, and when I voted for him, I thought, I think this is a very good man, and a man who's a good manager, who's going to steward the people's money wisely. And I think they would do well to look at arts programs, sending artists into the schools, sending kids to see things that artists are doing. I think it's a good use of the people's money.